In a dark time, the eye begins to see. This is how Theodore Rothko talks about darkness and vision. It's President's Day, February the 15th. And President's Day originally was a day to mark the birthdays of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. It linked those two together, and now celebrates the birthdays of all presidents. Abraham Lincoln had his own struggle with darkness, called melancholy at the time. A few years ago, I read the book 13 Reasons Why, and with my family, we just finished watching season 1 of the shows, which trace the thread of complexities of high school, depression, interpersonal relationships, and suicide. Parker Palmer, in his book Healing the Heart of Democracy, talks about his own struggle with depression, which came to him wave after wave. And he writes that much has been said about the voice of depression. It's a voice that speaks despairingly about the whole of one's life, no matter how good parts of it may be. A voice so loud and insistent that when it speaks, it is the only sound one can hear. I know that voice well. I've spent long days and nights listening to its deadly urgings. He quotes Theodore Rothko in A Dark Time the Eye Begins to See, and then says, during my sojourn on the dark side, it's hard to believe that my vision was growing sharper or to make sense of what I was seeing. And yet, as I slowly came back to life, I found that I had gained new clarity about myself, the community I depend on, and my call to re-engage its politics and relearn how to hold its tension in a life-giving way. He talks about discovering this book about heartbreak and depression, two of the most isolating and disabling experiences he knows, and that they can expand on one's sense of connectedness and evoke the heart's capacity to employ tension in the service of life. And then he references this book called Lincoln's Melancholy by Joshua Shank, a probing examination of our 16th president's journey with depression. What was then called melancholy first appeared in Lincoln's 20s, when neighbors occasionally took him in for fear that he might, like Hannah in 13 Reasons Why, take his own life. Lincoln struggled with this affliction until the day he died, a dark thread that traced through his life. Lincoln's need to preserve his life by embracing and integrating his own darkness and light, Palmer goes on to say, made him uniquely qualified to help America preserve the Union because he knew dark and light intimately, knew them as inseparable elements of everything human. He refused to split the North and the South into good guys and bad guys, a split that might have taken us closer to the national version of suicide. Instead, in his second inaugural address, delivered on March 4th, 1865, a month before the end of the Civil War, Lincoln appealed for malice toward none, charity for all, animated by what one writer calls an awe-inspiring sense of love for all who bore the brunt of the battle. So on this President's Day, we recognize Lincoln and his living with melancholy. In his appeal, Palmer goes on to say, to a deeply divided America, Lincoln points to an essential fact of our life together. If we are to survive and thrive, we must hold its divisions and contradictions with compassion, lest we lose our democracy. Lincoln has much to teach us about embracing political tension in a way that opens our hearts to each other, no matter how deep our differences. That way begins in here. As we work on reconciling whatever divides us from ourselves and then move out with healing power into a world of many divides, drawing light out of darkness, community out of chaos, and life out of death. So we'll ring a bell for those who struggle with what was called melancholy, or depression, that voice that speaks so loudly that all other voices in the room are hushed. And in our prayer for meditation with all those who live with that dark thread, we pray for a light, another voice, little by little might speak. For a lack of blaming or shaming. And an attention, a presence, which might show up in the form of others or by your Spirit, O God. Holding to a hope and a promise in the darkness that nothing separates us from your love, O God, which is no stranger to heartbreak and separation and darkness. Could you find us, O God, in these times of COVID? Could your voice speak? Letting us know we are not alone. Even in darkness. Blessings on your day.